Everyone is tired now. Not just, I didn't sleep well last night, tired. Not just, I had a long day, tired. But deep tired, mental tired, emotional tired. The kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix. And what's strange is this: we live in the most comfortable era in human history. Yet people feel more exhausted than ever. Most of us aren't working in fields. We're not walking miles for water. We're not fighting to survive day to day. So why does everything feel so heavy? Because modern exhaustion isn't caused by effort, it's caused by overload. Think about how much your brain handles in a single day. You wake up and immediately absorb information. Notifications, messages, news, expectations. Before your feet even touch the floor, your mind is already sprinting. And then all day long, the world asks you questions you were never meant to answer constantly. Am I doing enough? Am I falling behind? Am I wasting my life? Am I becoming someone worth being? That kind of pressure doesn't show up on a fitness tracker, but it drains you faster than physical labor ever could. This is why rest doesn't feel like rest anymore. We relax by scrolling. But scrolling isn't rest, it's more input, more comparison, more noise. Your body might be still, but your mind is running a marathon. That's why so many people end their day on YouTube. Not because they're bored, but because they're worn down. They're looking for something slow, something human, a voice that doesn't demand anything from them. And here's the part that surprises people. This isn't new. 2,000 years ago, people were exhausted too, not from technology, but from expectations, shame, pressure, and religious performance. By the time Jesus stepped onto the scene, people were drowning under rules, traditions, and the constant feeling of not being enough. And Jesus didn't look at them and say, "Try harder, do more, prove yourself." Instead, he noticed something deeper. The crowds following him weren't just curious, they were weary. Tired of pretending, tired of failing, tired of carrying burdens they didn't choose. And that's when Jesus said something completely different from every other teacher of his time. "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." Not sleep, not entertainment, not escape. Rest, the kind that reaches deeper than your body, the kind that quiets the noise inside your head. And that raises an uncomfortable question, one most of us avoid. What if the reason you're so tired isn't because you're lazy, isn't because you lack discipline, isn't because you're doing life wrong, but because you're carrying weight you were never designed to carry alone? Here's the part most people miss about Jesus. He didn't just come to fix behavior, he came to address exhaustion at the soul level. In the Gospels, Jesus is constantly surrounded by tired people. Fishermen who worked all night and caught nothing. Crowds who followed him for days without food. Religious people burned out by rules they could never keep. And Jesus never seemed surprised by their fatigue. In fact, he expected it. In Matthew 23, Jesus openly criticizes the religious leaders of the time, saying, "They tie up heavy burdens, hard to bear, and lay them on people's shoulders." That's not just about religion, that's about life pressure. The feeling that you're always behind, always disappointing someone, always one mistake away from failure. And here's something fascinating. Jesus often pulled away to quiet places, not because he was weak, but because he understood something we've forgotten. Even the Son of God didn't live in constant noise. Luke 5:16 says, Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. Not once, not occasionally. Often. That tells us something important. If Jesus, who healed people, spoke with authority, and carried the weight of the world, needed silence and communion with God, why do we think we can survive without it? Modern tiredness isn't just physical, it's spiritual dehydration. We consume endlessly, content opinions, entertainment comparisons, but we rarely replenish. Jesus uses this exact imagery in John 4 when he tells the woman at the well, "Everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again, but whoever drinks the water I give them will never thirst." He wasn't talking about literal water. He was talking about the kind of thirst that comes back every night when the distractions turn off. The thirst for meaning, the thirst for peace, the thirst to know your life matters. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. A lot of us are tired because we're trying to save ourselves, save our future, save our reputation, save our worth. But Jesus never invited people into self-salvation. He invited them into dependence. In Matthew 11, right after talking about rest, Jesus says, "Take my yoke upon you, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light." A yoke was something that connected two animals together to pull weight. Jesus wasn't saying, "Drop the load and do nothing." He was saying, "Stop carrying it alone." Most people are exhausted because they're yoked to fear. Fear of failure, fear of being forgotten, fear of not becoming enough. But Jesus offers a different yoke, one where your worth isn't earned daily, one where rest isn't a reward, it's a foundation. This is why Jesus didn't chase the crowds when they walked away. This is why he didn't build hype the way we do now. This is why his words often thinned the room instead of filling it. Because Jesus was never interested in people who were just consuming him. He wanted people who would abide. John 15 says, "Remain in me, and I will remain in you." Not rush, not perform, not grind endlessly, remain. Stillness wasn't optional in Jesus' life, and it isn't optional in a faith that actually sustains. And maybe the reason your life feels so loud, so fast, so draining, is because you're trying to live a Jesus-shaped life without Jesus-shaped rhythms. So here's the question Jesus quietly asks every tired generation. What are you actually living for? Because if your rest depends on success, you'll never rest. If your peace depends on approval, you'll always be anxious. If your worth depends on productivity, you'll always feel behind. Jesus never attached rest to achievement. He attached it to relationship. When Jesus says, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened," he doesn't follow it with conditions. He doesn't say, "After you fix your habits, after you get your life together, after you become impressive," he just says, "Come." And that's radical. Because the world trains us to believe we are only valuable when we are useful. But Jesus reveals a kingdom where you are valuable because you are known. Think about how Jesus treated people who were tired. He didn't rush them. He didn't shame them. He didn't tell them to try harder. When Elijah collapsed in exhaustion in 1 Kings 19, burnt out, depressed, and ready to quit, God didn't rebuke him. God fed him, let him sleep, and spoke softly. That's not weakness, that's wisdom. God understands human limits. He designed them. The problem isn't that we're tired. The problem is where we go with our tiredness. Most people numb it, scroll it away, drown it in noise. But Jesus invites us to bring it, not as a performance, not as a polished prayer, but as we are. In Psalm 62 it says, "My soul finds rest in God alone," not in outcomes, not in timelines, not in being ahead of everyone else, alone. And that's uncomfortable for modern life because silence exposes us. It forces us to face questions we avoid. Am I actually okay? Who am I when no one's watching? What happens if I stop striving? Jesus answers that fear with presence. He doesn't promise a life without work. He promises a life where work no longer defines you. That's why he could sleep in a storm. That's why he could walk slowly when people were rushing him. That's why he could lose followers and not panic. He wasn't anchored to crowds. He was anchored to the Father. And here's the quiet hope in all of this. If your life feels quiet right now, if progress feels slow, if you're tired in a way sleep doesn't fix, that doesn't mean God is absent. It might mean he's doing something deeper than you expected. Roots grow before fruit, depth forms before strength, and faith matures in places no one applauds. Jesus spent 30 years in obscurity for 3 years that changed eternity. So if you're in a season that feels unseen, don't despise it. You're not behind, you're not forgotten, you're not failing. You might just be learning how to rest the way Jesus did. And that kind of rest doesn't escape life. It teaches you how to finally live it.